is 8 p.m. Hello, good evening and good morning to Taiwan or Asian students and attendees. And welcome to the Data Analytics Colloquium. And my name is Carl Ho. I'm the co-host of this colloquium. We are really pleased and really excited that you can join us tonight and this morning. And we have our special speaker, Professor Christopher Achen, um, who will join us and give us a special speech about the U.S. election. And before I introduce Professor Achen, allow me to introduce Professor Pan, and he will talk about the colloquium and briefly introduce our setup and briefly introduce the whole plan, why we have this colloquium, the purpose, and yeah. Professor Pan.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good evening to you all in the US. I'm very happy, and it's really my honor to work with Dr. Ho to initiate this DAC, Data Analytic Colloquium. And this is really I think for myself, it's really my privilege to have so many very important scholars in this field, political science and the methodology. So I'm really looking forward to this series. And up to this point, I think we're quite successful. Well, that's from my perspective. But I believe that you agree with me. And today we have Professor Achen here, and he's going to talk about the election and the voting behaviors. I think this is, well, just from the synopsis, I think this is very insightful, and especially what is happening now. Everybody's very concerned about what's the next president or who's going to be the next president of the United States, and this is happening. So I think we're all very up to date, and I believe this will be very insightful and informative in terms of whether it's in practice or scholarly discussion. So I have a few students right here, but we have two classrooms. So you will see an empty one upstairs, and I'm sitting right downstairs right here. So it's quite different settings in Taiwan because the pandemic thing is not that a great threat here in Taiwan. A little bit fortunate for us, but I think you can have a more cozy settings. You can sit right at home or in your study. I think we have different settings, but we all come up together together here in this virtual platform. I think we'll be very. I think this is going to be a very informative and a very insightful events that we can enjoy. So that's about what I have to say now. Why don't we just turn to Dr. Ho or Dr. Achen, and we can start our presentation today.
Yeah, allow me to do some introduction to Professor Achen. Excuse me. And first thing first, let me give you a brief introduction about his record. Professor Chris Achen holds the Roger William Strauss Chair of Social Sciences at Princeton University, and he is most well known for his multiple brainchildren, and one of them is actually the Political Methodology Society, and he's the first president, and also he received many awards for being in the education, particularly in research methods, political methodology, and another most famous work and is his not just his studies in U.S. Politics or elections, but also he is an expert in Taiwan politics and Taiwan elections. So a couple of years, I think 2017, Dr. Achen edited a book with Professor T.Y. Wen titled The Taiwan Voter. And I highly encourage you to check out the book, Google it, and from the University of Michigan Press. And I believe that is one of the most influential volume on giving a good portrait and also the chronology of the Taiwan history of election and demobilization. So the Taiwan Voter editor, and also Professor Achen was award-winning teacher and professor, and he's much well appreciated, and he have many students and many followers, including one of them being me. I really admire him in his great teaching record and his style of delivering a speech, and also his research methods too. And it's really well cited. Now, and today he's giving a talk, giving a talk in a topic of studying elections in an era of unrepresentative surveys. So specifically, he prepared this speech about the UN's election, but also will talk about the Taiwan elections. And without further ado, let me introduce our tonight's special speaker, Professor Christopher Achen. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Peter and Carl. It's an honor for me to be talking to this important group scattered across at least 2 continents, and with so many young scholars. That's a particularly nice occasion for me to be introducing to you the things I've been thinking about. So I want to spend most of my time this evening for me, this morning for you, talking about the 2020, I'm sorry, about the 2016 election in the United States, a little bit about the 2020 election in Taiwan, and then at the end, I'll talk about the implications of what I've done for what's going to happen here in 2 weeks, the election in the United States. We have a presidential debate going on right now, actually, as I'm speaking, and my wife and I are recording it. We'll watch it after this. I don't expect it to be as intellectually stimulating as your questions are going to be, but I'll do the best I can to give you some distraction from it. All right, so let me try sharing my my slides here, and can everybody see that all right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So this is what I want to talk about. The blue wall, which is an expression that is very familiar here. I imagine many of you have heard it too. These are 3 American states. They had voted Democratic for at least 6 straight presidential elections before 2016. So they were states that the Democrats counted on in 2016. It seemed very unlikely that they would vote for Trump. Given the other states that Hillary Clinton won, she needed to win all 3 of these states to become president, but everyone thought that she was going to. However, Donald Trump carried them all in 2016 by tiny, tiny margins, less than a percentage point in each case, a total of fewer than 78,000 votes. This is an election in which 135 million ballots were cast. So 78,000 is a very small number. And as you all know, presidents are determined by how many states they carry, not by the popular vote. So Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 2.1 percentage points, but she lost the Electoral College by this margin in these 3 states. But how did that happen? What exactly happened in those 3 states? One thing that happened was that African American turnout was down. but it was only back to its normal levels, right? In the two elections before that, Obama was running, who of course is black himself, the first black American candidate and the first black American president. So naturally, African American turnout was higher when he was running. For any racial or ethnic group, turnout is always higher when one of their own runs. So that really wasn't a change. They went back to normal. And that was enough to cost Clinton Wisconsin and Michigan. But as far as people can tell who've looked closely at Pennsylvania, Trump would have won Pennsylvania anyway. And he only needed one of the three states, given his other state victories. So we think it's unfair to blame African Americans and their turnout for the loss. The bigger effect by far was the defection of non-college educated whites. So these are, again, white people who do not have a college degree. And it's that group, often called working class, although they are not working class by the usual sociological definition. They're just people who don't have a college degree. And they are a comfortable majority of white people in this country. Most white people do not have a college degree. So there are a lot of them, and they defected from the Democrats due to white identity issues. So here is some data that we have assembled. These are the three blue wall states. You can see them there, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And the dots here are municipalities. A municipality is essentially a town. Some of these towns have only 200 people in them. Some of them have tens of thousands. Each of them is a single dot here. And on the vertical axis, the y-axis, is this two-party swing to Trump. So if Romney, for example, Mitt Romney, who was the candidate in 2012, gets 50% of the vote in some municipality, and Trump got 60% of the two-party vote in the same municipality, then the swing is 10 percentage points. 60 minus 50 is 10. So that's what we're graphing on the y-axis. On the horizontal axis, or x-axis, we have the percentage of people with a college degree in the municipality. You can see that in these municipalities, there are some very prosperous, well-educated places with 80% college-educated adults, and other places where it's less than 10%. So there's a tremendous range. And what the graphs show you, they're all about the same in these three states, is that there was a huge swing to Trump in places with less college education. Notice that about 15 percentage points is a kind of a normal swing there at the far left, and some places swing 20 percentage points or more. These are huge swings in American politics. When Franklin Roosevelt defeated the Republican incumbent Herbert Hoover in 1932 in the middle of the Depression, the swing was only about 10 percentage points nationwide. So these swings are very large. They are earthquakes. And you can also see at the upper end of these graphs that the opposite was true in well-educated places. There aren't so many of those, but there was a swing against the Republicans in those places, averaging about 10 percentage points. Now, those dots on the right have more people in them than the dots on the left. A lot of the dots on the left are little tiny towns. So the swing at the state level wasn't as big as this graph would suggest, because a lot of the big votes come from those places to the right. But still, it was substantial. And the effect of that was to make Donald Trump president. Now, why those big swings? There are basically three sources for electoral swings. The first one is conversion. It's a long-standing idea in political science in this country, and also in ordinary politicians know this very well. So this is when you change people who voted for the other party last time to voting for you. So these are the people who voted for Obama and then switched to Trump. That's one possible source. And some people in the New York Times thought that was the main thing. Another possibility is mobilization. And this is when you get people who didn't bother to vote the time before to come out and vote for you because you are excited about them. And again, other authors in the New York Times have said that that was the main thing that happened. And lots of academics have been on one side or the other of this as well. Conversion and mobilization are the two standard things that people point to. But there's another possible source for vote swings as well, and that's demobilization. One author, McElwee, and his co-authors refer to the missing Obama millions. These are people who voted for Obama, but then didn't bother to go to the polls in 2016. There was a lot of Democratic complacency in 2016. They thought the election was over and done with and that Hillary was going to win, and they didn't bother to vote. So how important was conversion, mobilization, and demobilization? Where did Trump's votes come from? That's the question that my co-author and I, Jeremy Darrington, want to ask. Now, 4 years after that election, there is no consensus on this. You would think there would be, but it turns out to be hard to get the right answer, and there's no agreement yet. Now, you may say, so what? Well, if you're the losing party and you want to allocate your resources in the next election to try to get the presidency back, what do you do? How do you spend your money? And the usual approach is to say, look at why you lost last time. And so, for example, McElwee et al. Say that demobilization was the issue, and they cite a set of studies that show that. And so they say, get those Obama voters who stayed home and get them to vote. And that's what the Democratic Party should be doing. Griffin cites other people who find that conversion was more important than demobilization. And he says in most elections, turnout for all candidates tends to rise and fall together. And he says trying to raise turnout the way McElwee wants to do is just not likely. He says, don't bank on it. Now, what follows then is that these disagreements about conversion, mobilization, and demobilization, I'm going to call those CMD effects. Those are important to understand, not just for historical reasons. We'd like to know why Trump won last time, but also for deciding what to do this time. The problem is that we measure the three of them typically in completely incompatible ways. So we say, for example, the swing to Trump was 10 percentage points. The denominator there is the people who voted both times. Then we'll say that the rise in mobilization was 5 percentage points, and the base there is everybody who's registered to vote. And the same is true for demobilization, which we usually express as a percentage of the people who voted for one of the parties last time. So we'll say something like 25% of Obama's voters did not vote for Hillary in 2016. Now, those three measures, the kind of thing I just said, they're based on entirely different denominators, right? They are fractions in different universes. And so they're not comparable. And so you can't say which one is more important. So our first goal is to lay out a consistent framework with all three measures defined on the same base, the same sample. And for reasons of data availability and reliability, we use the registered voters as our sample universe. That's about 2/3 of Americans. Not everybody is registered. I could spend the entire rest of the talk talking about American data availability for turnout. I won't do that now, but I'm glad to say more about it in the question period if you're interested. It's a hard situation. It is the registered voters who are legally able to vote, and so we use those as our base. And so that, properly defined, these three measures, conversion, mobilization, and demobilization, they add up to the total change in the vote. So if you know how much demobilization mattered, and how much mobilization mattered, and how much conversion mattered, you can express the difference they made as a percent of the vote among registered voters. Then the sum of those three effects is the total effect. So the total swing to Trump is the sum of those three effects, all on the same basis, and therefore comparable. You would think people would have done this a long time ago, but I don't think they have. I think we're the ones who have written that down. So there's a lot of details in the paper, and I'm glad to send the paper to anyone who wants it. Now, you might say to me, well, Chris, why is this so hard? You just take a survey, you ask people, you can find out any percentages that you want. So this is the CCES, the Cooperative Congressional Election Study. Is a very big sample. Those authors took the survey and then adjusted the survey weights so that the actual outcomes, I have 2020 there, I mean 2016, the actual 2016 results are pretty much matched. So if you download the CCES and run the crosstab, who voted for Romney last time and Obama last time, and who abstained or voted third party last time, and then put on the other axis the 2016 vote, you can get a table of how everybody in 2012 moved to 2016. Doesn't that tell you everything? Well, it turns out it doesn't. So let's look first at the marginal here for voted Trump and voted Clinton. That shows in Wisconsin almost a tie. Clinton's a tiny bit higher than Trump, whereas the actual outcome was that Trump was a tiny bit higher than Clinton, but both within a percentage point. It's clearly within the margin of error, and there's no problem with that at all. However, they did not rake. Raking means adjusting the survey weights so that you get the answer that actually happened. They did not rake the 2012 results. And so the result of that is that there is an 11-point margin here between Romney voters and Obama voters in Wisconsin in the survey. So 52 minus 41 is 11. The actual number was 7. So it's pretty far off. You've just got too many Democrats in the survey. And that's after you fixed the problem for 2016. It's still too many Democrats. And then worst of all, the number of abstainers and third-party voters in the survey is between 6 and 7 percentage points. And the real number both years in 2012 and 2016 is about 30%. So it's very, very far off. So what does this tell you? It means that surveys are just not good for learning about turnout. First of all, people say they voted when they didn't. And then secondly, non-voters just don't respond to the survey. And that's why there are so few of them in that previous survey. That the 6 and 7%, those are the fraction of the people you talk to who admitted that they didn't vote. But actually, there were far more of them. What did those other non-voters do? They did not respond to the survey. So that's the problem. This is an extremely high quality academic survey, but it still has very large problems with turnout. So most studies just ignore all this. They just do the crosstab and they say, well, here's what happened with the people who did vote both times, and they just throw everything away. We want to do better than that. So we have two problems we want to fix. One is that there are too many Democrats in the survey, and the other is that there are not nearly enough abstainers and third-party voters. So we have two sources of information. One is the survey, which I just showed you. The other is the voter roll. In this country, the list of the people who are eligible to vote is more or less a public document. So if you wanted to know, for example, whether I voted in the school board election here last year, you could get the voter roll and look up Chris Achen and find out whether I voted in that election or not. You couldn't find out how I voted. That's not in the voter roll, but whether I voted is in there. And it is a public document, unlike in most other countries. So what's good about that is that the voter roll is the official record of whether people voted, and it's highly accurate about turnout, but it doesn't tell you anything about vote choices. The survey is very good about vote choices, but it doesn't do very well on turnout, as we've already seen, because people who don't vote don't respond to surveys. So you want to combine the two in a way that minimizes the flaws of the other. So in the paper, we use actual vote returns, the actual votes by municipality to do this. This is a multi-step process that I don't have time tonight to go through, but I'll give you a kind of rough idea of how it works. The biggest problem is that in this country, we let the states manage the elections. The federal government does not. In 2000, when we had a huge mess in this country because of Florida, one of my Argentinian graduate students said, I don't understand. Why don't you have the National Election Commission just straighten this out? And I said, well, we don't have a National Election Commission. And she said, well, who does manage this? And I said, well, in Florida, it's the Florida Election Commission. And she said, well, who runs that? And I said, well, roughly speaking, people who are members of the Republican Party in Florida and work for the state government. And she was just horrified. And she said, you know, Chris, we used to do this in Argentina too, under the military, but then we had a democratic revolution and we do this now in an honest way. Americans should think about that. And she's not wrong about that, but we still haven't fixed it. So there are lots of errors in the vote returns. They don't affect the outcome, but individual places are often misrecorded. It takes a lot of work to straighten them out. Secondly, as you'll see, we need census data. So for example, if we want to know how educated the municipality is, we need to use the census data. That means we need to match the census data to the vote returns. The states do the vote returns. The federal government does the census. So they don't use the same names for the municipalities and so on. It's just a lot of trouble. So there are some missing data. We deleted those. We still had more than 6,000 municipalities from these 3 states. What do we do? We take the CCES survey for each of these states, about 900 observations in Wisconsin, about 1,500 in Wisconsin, and a little over 2,000 in Pennsylvania. We create the same kind of variable I showed you in the crosstab. It has this problem I mentioned, too few GOP means Republican, and way too few abstain in third party. And we rake, that is to say, we adjust the survey weights so that those 2 things are corrected. We change the survey weights so that we get enough Republicans and enough abstainers. And then we don't worry about the abstainers in the survey because there are so few of them. Then we use the voter files to see how many people voted both times, how many people voted in 2012 but not 2016, and so on. And some people die or move away between 2012 and 2016. So again, we rake to get that corrected. So then we combine these 2 data sets. Again, the voter rolls give you the right turnout numbers, but they don't tell you who voted how. The survey tells you who voted how, but it's very bad on turnout. So we use the 2 together, and we use each one for the things that it's good at, and we don't use each one for where it's weak. So we don't use the survey to tell us about turnout. We don't use the voter rolls to tell us about vote choices, and we combine them. So this turns out to be a matrix equation problem. It's essentially 13 equations in 9 unknowns. The matrix is of rank 9, so it's just identified. You can turn this into a regression equation. You can bootstrap the standard errors, 10,000 reputations each, treating the vote returns and the voter file as fixed, but resampling over the survey. So again, that may not mean anything to those of you who don't do bootstraps, but for those of you who do, that's the procedure. And again, details in the paper. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is an example of the kind of results that you get. If for example, you look at this row, this row tells you the actual share of the registered voters that the 2 candidates and abstention got in 2012. So in Wisconsin, Romney got 38.1%, Obama got 43.8%, and the abstainers were 18%. That's the total that they got. And these things tell you where those people went. So of the Romney voters, who were 38% of the total, 76% of them voted for Trump, 4% voted for Clinton, and 20% switched to a third party or didn't vote. And the same here for what happened to the Obama voters and then what happened to the abstainers. I want to just direct your attention to 2 comparisons. This is the Republicans who switched to Clinton. This is the Obama voters who switched to Trump. This number is much bigger than this. And that tells you that Trump benefited from conversion, right? That's what these 2 entries are. They are conversion. People switching from one voting both times and switching from one party to the other. Then in this column, I want to direct your attention to these 2 numbers. This is the percentage of the former abstainers and third-party voters that Trump picked up. It's almost 22%. This is the percent that Clinton picked up. That's 15. So 22 is bigger than 15, and that tells you that Trump benefited from getting people who hadn't voted for the two main parties at the previous election. That's mobilization, right? These are people who didn't vote two-party the last time and now are. And Trump is getting more of them than Clinton is. So Trump is benefiting from conversion. That's this comparison. He's benefiting from mobilization. That's that comparison. Down here, the opposite's true, and that he is losing almost 20% to people not voting or voting third party. And it's mostly the libertarian vote in Wisconsin that is up so much. There are just a lot of middle class Republicans who couldn't stand Trump and they voted libertarian. This is the corresponding number for Clinton. So you can see that she is actually doing better than he did. There's been a lot of writing about how many Obama voters dropped out, but the interesting thing here is that Trump's actually losing more if you include his losses to third-party voters. So basic message, Trump gains from conversion, he gains from mobilization, he loses from demobilization. Here's the corresponding numbers for, I should say that the numbers in parentheses are the standard errors, so we're doing pretty well on those. The main numbers are known to reasonable certitude. Here's the same table for Michigan. I'm not going to go through that. And Pennsylvania. Glad to talk more about it in the question period. What happens across these three states is that they are pretty similar. The only difference in how the voters behave, the only real difference is that there was more mobilization in Pennsylvania. And what's going on there is that Pennsylvania was a so-called battleground state. That means it was thought to be close. A lot of money was spent to try to get people to the polls, and it was successful. Wisconsin and Michigan were not thought to be going to be close, and much less money was spent there, and so people didn't vote. Now we can take that table that I just, sorry, question. Please. I am not hearing you. I'm sorry, I'm still not hearing. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Can you try again?
Okay, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, here comes the sharing. Okay, is that working?
Okay. Working, thank you. Thank you.
So here are the overall gains, and again, this is the total swing in these three states due to the Trump swing as a percentage of the registered voters, and these numbers here are how much of the swing was due to conversion, mobilization, and demobilization. So in Michigan, for example, about 3 percentage points of Trump's gain was conversion. About 4.5 was mobilization. And then he lost about 1% to demobilization. So as you can see, these states are similar. Trump is gaining from mobilization, and he's gaining from conversion, and he's losing from demobilization. The numbers are, it's pretty similar across the three states. This is the one exception where there's more conversion in Wisconsin, and I can talk in question period about why that was the case. But this is how you get those numbers. It's complicated, and the reason it's complicated is that the surveys are not reliable about turnout. So you have to do some extra steps. For political purposes, the main thing this shows you is that conversion and mobilization both matter. If Trump had only conversion, for example, he would have been in a tie in Wisconsin here, but in these two states, he'd have fallen well short. And the same is true about turnout effects, which is the sum of these two. So the message here is you can't just do conversion or just do turnout. You've got to do both. They both mattered. They both put Trump over the top in these states. Now, just briefly, you can look also at white municipalities. These are we match them to low education municipalities and whites with no college degree in the survey. We do exactly the same thing. Look at the size of these swings in percentage points. They're about 3 times as large as the statewide swing. So as we saw earlier, the white non-college people are just very enthusiastic. The interesting thing here is that, again, you get the same message that mobilization and conversion both matter, and that Trump didn't gain very much from demobilization, or he lost a little bit. So this looks a lot like the previous graph table qualitatively, but the numbers are just much bigger, right? The size of the effect in these blue wall white municipalities is just very large. So non-college whites have been moving to the Republicans ever since Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton carried them, but Democrats have had a hard time since. But this was really an earthquake. So one needs all 3 of these things to understand. Now, what about Taiwan's 2020 election? Can I say anything about that briefly? How big was the swing? Now, let me remind you what everybody thought happened in that election, and that was that Tsai Ing-wen surged to victory at the end because of Hong Kong. That's the standard view. And there was a lot of discussion about how Taiwan voters are becoming more anti-Beijing, and people said if you were offended by Hong Kong, you were more likely to vote DPP. But, just correlations. What actually happened? One interesting thing to look at is the actual votes here. And you can see there in the first row that the DPP was up 1 percentage point. The KMT was up, the People First Party was down, and in sum, Pan Blue went from 43.8 to 42.9, a shift of less than a percentage point. DPP gained 1 percentage point. And so there just wasn't any dramatic surge in 2020. To a good approximation overall, it was just a constant. The Hong Kong situation, on the other hand, changed dramatically. So it's hard to explain a constant with a change. And that suggests that the story isn't as simple as journalists said. What I want to direct your attention to tonight is that, or in the morning, depending on where you are, is that if anti-China sentiment was the main factor, then DPP gains should have come in green areas and losses in blue areas, right? Do they? Well, these shifts are a lot smaller than the ones we were just looking at in the United States. They're 3-4% the most. But the biggest DPP gains are in those cities and counties that I've listed there. And those are not hotbeds of DPP sentiment. None of them gave the DPP more than 51% in 2016, which is well below the DPP average. And conversely, the biggest vote losses for the DPP in 2020 was just almost 2 percentage points. And that was in Yunlin, where they got 63% of the vote the time before. So they are a stronghold of independent sentiment. In fact, 4 of the 5 counties where the DPP lost more than a percentage point had given them 63% or more the last time around. So these are the hotbeds of independent sentiment, and they actually turned away from the DPP. So this is not what you would expect if independence was the main issue and Hong Kong raised it, right? One more piece of evidence. In 2004, Taiwan citizens voted on 2 referendums proposed by the Chen Shui-bian administration. These were not explicitly independence referendums, but they were certainly interpreted that way. So I want to use them here in the same way that I used percent college educated among whites. That is, as the key variable influencing the swing. So among those places that here, this green thing, among the places that voted less than 30% for the independence referendum, the vote for the DPP actually rose on average 2 percentage points in Taiwan. These are, the data here are Li. They are Li matched, the 2020 Li is matched to the 2016 Li. Now, some ID numbers have changed, so I couldn't match them all. I've got 4,358 out of almost 8,000 total. So these are the ones that match. And if you were a little more pro-independence, then the DPP gained 1. 40 to 50% for independence, that it was unchanged. And the places that were heavily pro-independence in 2004, the vote for the DPP actually fell. So this seems to me a suggestion that the 2020 Taiwan election did not work in the way that so much journalistic comment said that it did. But people believe that it did, and that has already led to speculation that Beijing is going to be more heavy-handed with Taiwan. In fact, we've already seen that, and I think that's a possible misinterpretation of the election, and a dangerous one. So, in conclusion, this stuff matters, right? This stuff matters. In the American data, it mattered for the strategies that the parties are going to use this time. You need to understand 2016 in order to do your best in 2020. And in Taiwan, the misunderstanding, what seems to me a misunderstanding of the 2020 election, has led to foreign policy tensions. Now, also from this is an implication that no one procedure works everywhere. And the way I did the American data would have to be changed to make it work in Taiwan. And that's because of local data availability. Your election returns are much better than ours. You have good surveys. What you don't have are publicly accessible voter rolls, right? You can't tell what the turnout rate is in individual Li. The exception to that is 2016. The Election Commission in Taiwan released those data, but that's all they've released. To my knowledge, they have not released the 2020 ones. And so I did not get to conversion, mobilization, and defection estimates in Taiwan because the data, I don't have the data. You Taiwan scholars should do that if you're interested. As I say, they haven't released the data file. So you need a file that tells whether people voted in both 2016 and 2020, or only one of those, or in neither of those. And to do that, you need to get the Taiwan Election Commission to release those data. I hope that you can manage to do it. Okay, that's my talk. And your questions and comments and criticisms are very welcome.
All right, and
Let me see.
thank you very much. I think this is really exciting. the the stuff here is I'm sorry, I used this. The evidence and your methods is really um, um, accelerating to me because um, I used to think about using ecological inference to get aggregate data to estimate individualized data, but your
Yes.
method is eye-opening to me. And now, while we are waiting for the questions from the floor, from many of our attendees, let me let me do that. Uh, um, Let me do the first question first. Then I have another of my students asking about demobilization. I think the CMD is a really interesting uh, in-depth analysis and how the votes come from and how the votes get lost. So from your observation, the strategy is to minimize the demobilization, or at least will not let that cancel out your mobilization and conversion data and conversion votes, then you will get the upper hand. So, but will that be different for the two camps? So now I think this one, of course, you're applying to the two-party system, and now the third party, or that in the multi-party system or the PR system will be more complicated. I think it's still doable, but of course much more complicated because you can have so many combinations. Then, so in this case, and we do it for a two-party system, how much do you think that will be? Now I'm thinking about many questions about, particularly from the first question is about the strategists of the two campaigns will focus their campaign to minimize the mobilization, but in the meantime concentrate on conversion. I think conversion is the biggest number that I see. Maybe I did not pay close attention. Is this what what your message primarily is?
Um, there's a fair amount of both. Let me flip back real quickly to that slide.
Yes.
So here's conversion is this row, and it's the big one in Wisconsin. Yeah. But in Michigan and Pennsylvania, it's actually smaller than mobilization. So averaged over the three states, it's about 50-50. Now they both matter, and they matter about equally. Let me get out of the thing here. Okay, can you?
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
See me okay now? Let me get rid of it.
Okay. Let me see. All right, I can see you okay now. Yeah.
So to answer your question, Carl, as best I can, the first honest thing to say is I don't know, because no one has tried this in a more multi-party system, and so I can't be 100% sure. My guess is that it will be difficult with small parties. And the reason it'll be difficult is that you don't get enough survey respondents from those little parties. And so those estimates are very noisy, and
yeah, the cells are small.
That's the problem.
The cell entries are small. Yeah.
Exactly. So if I were doing this in Taiwan, I would probably do pan blue versus pan green first, just to get the basic idea of what's going on, and then try it with smaller parties as well. And
now, I have a couple of questions. Maybe I can come back to that. I do not want to usurp I would take priorities. Students' questions higher priority. Elizabeth Stringer, one of our PhD students, is asking you to explain again demobilization. Can you explain a bit more of that?
Yes, I know I rushed a little bit at the beginning, and I and at some other places too, and I apologize for that. I wanted to make sure I had time to talk about both the U.S. and Taiwan, so some things went by a little quickly, and that's my fault. So let me just take a second on all three of these things. So again, conversion is when you take it is when somebody votes for the other party last time and then changes to voting for your party this time. That's conversion. They're converting, like a religious conversion or something like that. Mobilization happens when the person did not vote at all last time, or voted for a third party. And then this time they decide to vote for you. So let's say Trump, you're Trump. They decide to vote for Trump. They're being mobilized. Mobilized means to get somebody started, right? So you're taking somebody who didn't vote at all last time or didn't vote for a major party, and you're moving them into voting for you. That's mobilization. And then demobilization is just the opposite of that, where they did vote for you last time, but this time they don't. They also don't vote for your opponent. They either stay home or they vote third party.
Okay, then I think maybe I add up a little bit more. If you combine these three CMDs and positive, negative, that is how each candidate gain votes comparatively.
That's right.
And for example, if one candidate can convert from other candidate more, can mobilize from non-voters more, demobilize the least, then he or she will gain advantage to the other ones. So this is really interesting. Now I'm thinking about how you can use this data. I think you just demonstrated how to calculate it using the survey data, using the real turnout data. I'm thinking about the possibilities, and maybe I can talk to other colleagues to invite other colleagues to be professors in Taiwan and Hong Kong to chime in. I'm thinking about now you can use that as some kind of independent variable to predict the actual support the votes. But I'm more interested in taking those as dependent variables. For example, I would build a theory why Donald Trump could demobilize more. So that is his demobilized votes, and put the right hand side thinking about what his record is and how the economy and etc. That would be something I want to invite questions from the floor, maybe later. After that, Professor Achen can answer that. How do we use this data for more interesting research follow-up? I have another student, Nathan Gonzalez. He has a question reading, in regards to the U.S. elections from 2012 to 2016, and are CMD the only factors that came into play, or are they just the three major factors that stood out? So that is the second term of Obama administration. Yeah. Do you have data, or do you have a field about that?
I do have a remark to make about that. These are the kinds of voters who changed, and they can change in any of these three ways. Now, why they changed and whether the factors that made them change are the same in each of those three categories is a good question that I think we don't currently know the answer to. So for example, we know that a big part of Trump's victory was people who have a strong identity with being white and who may be prejudiced against Black people or other minorities, may be worried about immigration and a variety of other things. But that is a separate set of questions from the ones I'm addressing. So you can ask, for example, was white identity more important in conversion than it was in mobilization? Or are those the same two set of factors? And right now, we don't really know the answer to that yet. But I think it's a question that hasn't been asked, and it seems to me quite an important one. So, you know, take the people who voted for Obama and then switched to Trump. It's not very likely that those people are racist, since they voted for an African American at the previous election, right? But racism could be a factor in the other two kinds of change. So this, in a way, opens up, you know, a whole new set of questions, I think. But what I want to say is, in response to the question, is that getting these numbers straight, how many people came from these various categories, is one thing. And then there's a separate thing, which is, okay, then why did they do that? Was it economics, that their municipality is in decline and unemployment is high, or is it white identity, or is it something else? So those are just, we've been talking about this question as if the Trump voters were all the same kind of people, and we wanted to treat them all the same. What this way of thinking opens up, I think, is the possibility that the people who converted and the people who mobilized and the people who demobilized might be different kinds of people responding to different variables.
And also, there is a race with incumbent. The 2016 is the race is with open seat. So that may make a difference also. Very good. And let me read out another two questions, if you don't mind. Do you have any prediction for how CMD will play out for Biden and Trump in November? I think you put it on your sleeves already. This is a piece of paper. Finally, this come up.
Yes. There is a lot of interest in this, and everybody is looking very closely at the data to see what's going on. So let me say about 2018, I have my co-author and I have not looked at 2018, but it appears that's the midterm elections, congressional elections. It looks as though the mobilization was very important there, and the Democrats benefited from that, and more Republicans who had voted in 2016 dropped out in 2018. So they demobilized, and a lot of Democrats mobilized, and that was an important part of the swing there for the Democrats in that election. So the issue that's looming large right now is this: is 2020 going to look like 2018, or is it going to look like 2016? So far with the early voting, it looks like about a quarter of Americans have already voted, a quarter of the people that are going to cast a vote. Now, if turnout is up a lot, then this 25% won't be, it'll have a bigger denominator and it won't be 25%, but right now it looks like about a quarter have voted. And it is disproportionately people who have a Democratic Party registration or have voted in Democratic primaries in the past and therefore look like Democrats. So the challenge this year, so we know about that. We also know that more Republicans say they are going to vote on election day by going to the polls. So the initial mail-in vote looks like it will be more heavily Democratic. The in-person vote on election day will be more Republican. And anybody who tells you they know how mobilization and demobilization are going to look at that point doesn't know what they're talking about. This is just such an unusual situation that we just don't know. We're on better grounds with conversion because that's from the surveys. And it definitely looks as though there are going to be a fairly large number of people who voted for Trump who will switch to Biden. And that the Democrats will benefit from conversion. But that could be overwhelmed by the turnout effects. And as I say, there just isn't. In a crazy year like this with so many mail ballots in New Jersey where I live, except for people with a disability, everybody else is voting by mail. We have never done that in New Jersey before. And so it's, we just don't know.
I believe there should be more follow-up question on this. Now, allow me to read out another question from Elizabeth Stringer. And do you have any data about how large the mobilization has changed from year to year? I think, yeah, that's a good question. Do you have any plan to extend it maybe backward?
Yeah, we would very much like to do that. We've taken some initial steps to look at 2008 versus 2012 to see what these effects look like. And those are relatively similar elections. Obama is running in both. All of the effects are much smaller. If you do these same kind of graphs that I showed you, where you look at the swing versus the percent college educated, there's almost nothing there. It's almost dead flat. It just didn't matter. So it's 2012 versus 2016. We haven't done a full set of stuff. It looks like there's some conversion, some mobilization, and some demobilization, but all of the effects are they're like this, right? Instead of these huge things that we were seeing in 2016. So 2016 is just a very big election, and in white no college places among those people, it's a huge election. There are huge effects.
Yeah, allow me to turn to Peter. I'm sorry, taking too much space and time and asking questions. Now, Peter, can you take over? I think your turn now.
All right, here in excuse me. Here in this lecture house, we have a couple of questions. Let me read out it for you. One of them is that how do you think about what Trump is strategically doing right now in terms of the CMD? For example, standing against China, that's the foreign policy. and
Yes.
then Hunt Biden's scandal, etc. So I think this kind of using the strategy of a C or M or D try to gain this advantage. So what do you think about his strategy? This is the one question. There are a couple more in the following, so maybe for this after.
Okay, let me try to answer that one. Yeah, thanks for that. Let me try to answer that briefly, and then we'll go to the other questions. Trump is not very well controlled by his campaign people. So they do not want him to do what he's doing in most instances. And so far, his campaign has been, as far as we can tell from the surveys, very ineffective. He has spent most of his time on his base. And since he had those people last time, what he's trying to do is to minimize demobilization from that group. In other words, he wants the people who voted for him last time to vote for him again. And the way he's doing that is by emphasizing the same themes that he did last time. And again, it's white identity issues for the most part. And then some things about the economy and the tax cuts. There's a set of people who vote for him for that reason. And then also the religiously conservative Supreme Court appointments he's made, and he's trying to make another one, as you know. And he's using that to appeal to conservative Christians. Just by way of side remark here, conservative Christians are only about half of Christians. So sometimes if you are in another country, you look at the United States, you think all Christians are evangelicals or conservative Catholics, and they're very much not. But that half of Christians he's trying to appeal to also. So this is, since he already has those people, or had them last time, that's mostly an attempt to minimize demobilization. He's also trying a little bit to get some conversion, and that's by getting people who did not vote for him last time to move to him. It's not obvious who those people really are or should be. He's trying to appeal to older people, for example, many of whom voted for him last time. He's trying to get them back, but that's not really conversion. Suburbanites, he's trying to convince them that the Black Lives protests are threatening to them and they should switch to him. None of that's been very effective. So and nobody thinks there's a lot of mobilization out there to be done by people who weren't mobilized last time for him. So it really is a campaign on his part that's focused on rallying his base, and he has not moderated to try to bring in independents and so forth, and he is, according to all reports, he is driving his campaign managers crazy because he won't do what they think needs to be done to win the election. And so he's way down in the polls now. He's down about 10. 10 is a big number in American elections, and if that holds, and Biden wins by 10, you will see a lot of Republican senators defeated along with him.
Yeah, thank you for answering that question. And the other one is, okay, Trump seems to, you mentioned that using the CMD methods or analysis seems to show that Hong Kong issue didn't explain Tsai Ing-wen's victory in 2016, comparing to, I mean, to 2020. 2020. 2020 comparing to the 2016 win. So am I correct?
Yes.
You mentioned that. Okay, and then Trump seems to escalate related issue. Trump seems to escalate the military tension between the U.S. and China in this area, the West Pacific area. So China is kind of taking it out from our perspective, taking it out on Taiwan by showing the military threat on Taiwan. So what do you think that how Taiwan voters would react to this the muscle act? What I mean, of course, we don't have a election this year, but for right now, we are not in a campaign. But what do you think about this Taiwan voter would react to this? Because your finding was kind of not what people always talk about, right? People,
Yes.
and yeah, people are saying that the Hong Kong issue is very crucial
Yes.
for its high spend. Yeah, but your data didn't say that, right? Didn't show that, didn't support that that sentiment. So China is what China is doing is that keep threatening Taiwan, and then so from if the same logic, China is doing making the right move, right?
I'm not hearing you. Something is in the background there.
Peter, can you repeat the last question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, can hear you now.
Just the last couple sentences. You just faded out.
The last couple sentences about. So does that mean that China is doing the right move by escalating or showing the more military threat to Taiwan, and then probably Taiwan people will yield to this act instead of provoking, the anti-China sentiment. So I don't know what is this was the question people students trying to know. So did you get Achen?
Yes, I'm here. I was just waiting for you to finish. Is that it?
Pretty much it. Yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty much.
Sure. There's a little music running in the background from somewhere.
That's my boy practicing his piano.
Oh, okay.
I will mute my mic. Okay.
No problem.
Downstairs. Yeah.
Well, let me begin by saying that that I wrote a different book right before The American Voter with Larry Bartels, and about how to think about democracy and so on from the empirical side. And in it, we made some remarks about China. We talked about how Mao was probably murdered more people than anybody else in human history, and that we don't regard China as any kind of a real democracy. So we got an inquiry from a Chinese publisher to publish this book in Chinese. In China, and they said, we'll do it, but we have to take out these negative remarks that you made about China, and then it'll pass the censors and we can publish it here. And Larry and I refused to do that. So if the book exists in Chinese, it's a pirated version. They probably cut out all the stuff they wanted to cut out. But it didn't raise my opinion of the Chinese government any. The US and China are simply headed into a period of great power competition, and everybody knows that. Taiwan is a very likely flashpoint, and we are in the middle of debates here, as we almost always are, but they have intensified recently, about what our relationship to Taiwan should be. And there's a set of people who argue that we should make an unequivocal commitment to Taiwan, and others who argue that we should continue the current policy of strategic ambiguity. The danger of strategic ambiguity is that if our bluff is called and Beijing does attack Taiwan, we would have to make a decision about whether we would come to your defense. As I tell my deep green friends, a lot depends on how this crisis emerged and whether it was Taiwan's fault, basically. And if it's irresponsible behavior, I don't think will come. So it is a very sensitive topic for Taiwan, for China, and for the United States. And it's not, it's not drifting in Taiwan's direction as China gets stronger and stronger. So I worry about this a lot. But I do feel that if China goes out of its way to tilt the balance of power in Asia by taking Taiwan over, that would be regarded as a grave matter of concern to the United States of America. Now, that was strategic ambiguity right there, but that's the policy of the traditional policy of my government. I agree with it. So as T.Y. Wong and I argued in the Taiwan Voter Book, and this is particularly T.Y.'s part of the argument, the China question is the central question in Taiwan politics. And I just worry that if China gets more aggressive, combination of the United States provoking them, as the Trump administration has on several occasions, and or Taiwan not being careful, that we could have a real tragedy. I think Tsai Ing-wen has worked with us pretty well, and that was not true of the previous DPP administration, where the United States was not happy with them. We felt we were not treated as a friend. We are being treated as a friend by this administration, and I'm hopeful that we can just continue where we are with the status quo as long as possible. That's I don't know what other possibilities there are. The responsibility then on our part is to be careful, and the responsibility on Taiwan voters' part is in my view, is to be responsible also, and to be careful, because it's a dangerous, your situation is a dangerous one.
Peter, do you have more questions from the floor?
One very short one.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, some students interested in the general sentiment among U.S. voters toward China, because sometimes people argue that the foreign policy and the public opinion, there is some relationship between these two in the U.S. foreign policy. So he's interested in the general sentiment among U.S. voters. What's their sentiment?
It has, the sentiment toward China in this country has gone up and down over the years. During the Korean War, obviously, it was very negative. There was a period under Nixon when feelings were better. We were essentially allied with China against Russia, and that was a period in which relations between us were good. That was the Kissinger period. Things have drifted downward since then, and there was a very recent poll I just saw done by the Pew Foundation. They're terrific survey researchers that looked at American attitudes toward China, and they have become more negative. particularly among Republicans. So I just think that rising tensions between our two countries, China and the United States, are inevitable, and that they're spending very heavily on the military. So do we, and we are each other's most obvious major enemy at this point. So it is a relationship that needs to be managed. We have some interests in common, and we are competitors in some other areas. And some aspects of Chinese foreign policy have been quite aggressive. Their attitudes toward the islands in the South China Sea, for example, have been condemned by all the countries in that part of the world, except China. We're getting near clashes between their ships and our ships, between their airplanes and our airplanes. So it is simply getting more tense, and the American people aren't paying a huge amount of attention to this right at the moment, but they have begun. And as they pay more attention, they get more negative.
Okay. Allow me to switch gear. I have a couple more questions, Peter and Chris, from one of our students, Gary Reinhardt. And how large of an effect do independent groups like the Lincoln Project, past Trump voters dedicated to getting Biden elected, have on voter conversion? This is very specific about the Lincoln Project. I'm sorry. Is this something that has been measured before, and how common it is for groups like that to launch campaigns geared specifically toward flipping voters? It's a conversion, yeah.
Yes, it is. I think we won't know the answer to that for sure until after the election, but it is one of the biggest problems facing the Trump campaign, that a substantial fraction of Republicans, especially former office holders, Republican intellectuals, and so on, are quite opposed to him. There was a major statement here about a month ago by a very large number, I'm not remembering the exact number, but more than 100 former Republican intelligence and foreign policy officials saying that they were going to vote for Biden. So that whole wing of the Republican Party, the experienced insiders, the Republican establishment, they are very negative about Trump. And as the questioner said, they have organizations to push their point of view. It's going to be hard in the end to sort out how much of the changes were, the Lincoln Project, how much were other things in the media about Republican unhappiness among, better educated Republicans, especially women, and so on. Sorting that out will be difficult, but the effect is not zero. I think everybody agrees on that. There's going to be some conversion effects of normal Republican voters not voting for Biden this year.
We have one more, and actually two more. One of our students, Aaron Hawley, asked, do you find that voters who have switched their party votes since the previous presidential elections are more or less willing to respond to surveys? This is a really good question. Are they more or less willing to respond to surveys? Are there any issues associated with these voters being reluctant to respond to surveys and not showing up in the data? Yeah.
I don't know the answer to the specific question that was asked, namely about whether people who convert are especially likely to not respond. I don't know the answer to that. I've never seen any work on that. I do know that a lot of people think that there is something called the shy Trump voter, people who favor Trump but are unwilling to say so to interviewers. The evidence for that is non-existent. We've looked for that. We've looked for it in previous elections where people said there were shy voters. I think it's partly just people living in, college towns and thinking, well, I know people who are for Trump here, but they wouldn't say so because all their friends are for Biden, and so they think they'll be embarrassed. But college towns are not America. And out there in America, there are whole states where most people are for Trump. So they don't need to be shy. They're perfectly willing to say that they favor Trump. This is an example of an idea that comes along in every election. Maybe the polls are wrong because people pretend to vote for somebody, but they're really going to vote for somebody else. This has been checked over and over and over in elections in this country and in Britain, and they never find more than a tiny number of such people. I think the much bigger problem is people being called or contacted by social media and asked whether they'd participate in the poll and saying, I'm a Republican, all those crazy professors, I'm not going to talk to them. That's a much bigger problem. And that's why you saw in the data that I showed you that there are not enough Republicans in the surveys. They just don't want it, and this is true in exit polls too. They just don't want to. They just don't want to talk to people. That wasn't true 50 years ago, but it is now. And that's the much bigger problem, and that's what you worry about. Last time, the reason the polls were wrong in the blue wall states was that the non-college educated Trump voters didn't respond to the polls in the same numbers. They responded, but much less. And we didn't take that into account. And so we were wrong.
That actually is related to a question I did run a model about, but it's a different question, Aaron. And that is to run a model on the respondents who said they don't know or they do not want to respond. So our models indicate they are generally closer to the losing party. And of course, this is a smaller group, but that survey is using Taiwan data, 2012, I think 2012, we have a unusually large group, maybe 30%. 30% they said they do not know, they did not respond. So we build a model of this 30% of data, then found out they are, if they are a losing party, they are less likely. I think it's a post-election survey. They are less likely to say they vote or not, or support or not. But indeed, in this case, Aaron's question is, it's really difficult to find out if they converted, that make them not to respond. Something is only this is not this, but this is really interesting question.
It is.
Yeah, something we can find ways to, maybe you and your co-author can figure out a creative way to find out, how many are they, and what is the model of these voters. There's one more question in the chat box. It's sort of similar from Hannah Shin, one of my students from South Korea. She asked really similar questions you addressed before. Do you think that China's aggressive foreign policy influences the American voters' decision?
That I do know the answer to, and
Yes.
the answer is no. The voters have almost never paid attention to foreign policy. back to the earliest days when we were surveying them right after World War II, they just don't. It doesn't reach them in a very meaningful way. And you know, German voters after World War II, they were standing in cities that had been reduced to rubble, and they were interviewed, and some of them said, yeah, I voted for Hitler, but I didn't think about foreign policy. And that's just how it goes. They just don't pay attention. The one exception to that is unsuccessful wars. So both Korea, which dragged on too long for the American people, even though in retrospect that was a war that we should have fought and did, and the Vietnam War, which happened when I was young and which dragged on too long, and we shouldn't have fought, should not have fought. In both cases, when they went on a long time and we were not victorious, the voters did seem to punish for that. But in advance, thinking in advance what we should do about China, for example, that just doesn't interest much of anybody, and it's unfortunate, I think, but because the president is so powerful in foreign policy, and it matters a lot, but the voters don't focus on that, and they never have.
All right. And Peter, on your side, do you have more students asking questions about Taiwan or U.S.? And now I'm still waiting for more questions in the chat box. But for now, I have no questions on the chat box now.
Here's a short question, very short one. And what does Trump's quick recovery from COVID-19, if not conspiracy, help his campaign?
I would say that it kept it from being damaged. In other words, if he had gone into the hospital and been quite seriously ill for quite a while, that would have been harmful to him, and he knew that. He got out of the hospital apparently before his doctors thought he should, because he did not want to appear old and sick and weak. Those are the kinds of things that hurt you. Both Biden and Trump are quite old by American standards. Whichever one of them wins, if they take office on election day, on inauguration day, they will be the oldest presidents ever to take the oath of office. So, they are at risk, both of them, and people know that, and older voters do in particular. They are both older than I am, but not in Trump's case, not by much. And older voters know that you can have health problems. So they both are working hard at looking very, very healthy. And if Trump had a long battle against COVID, I'm quite sure that would have hurt him. He thought so, and that's why he did what he did.
Yeah. Yeah. For him, and I don't know whether this is his is being of some luck, and or the really the medicine is really effective, and but it's a very brief period. They was out in yeah. All right, and Peter, more questions from the Taiwan students, please.
Yeah, the other one is quite similar. It's about Hunter Biden's scandal, his son. Yeah, does that affect the campaign? What do you think about that?
We have a fair amount of data on what people think about that. People who are Republicans and are already planning to vote for Trump, they think it's a big deal and Biden is corrupt and so on. nobody else cares. It's just not working as a campaign theme for the Republicans. One of the hardest problems the Republicans have had this time is finding something that would work against Biden and Harris. So with Harris, when she got the nomination, they spent a little time saying she was a crazy left-winger who would bring socialism. And they were also saying she's really tough on crime and very conservative and you wouldn't want her. Well, you can have one of those or you can have the other one, but you can't have them both, right? And they were just throwing things out to try to see what would be effective. And neither one particularly was. So they've, by contrast against Hillary Clinton, they had things that people were worried about that they could emphasize and that those played into the stereotype of her pretty well. But, trying to paint Biden as a crazy, dangerous left-wing guy when he's just, he's Joe from Scranton, Pennsylvania. For the Taiwan people, it's like being from, I don't know, Kaohsiung or something. I'm a big fan of Kaohsiung, and I'm particularly a fan of the fish dinners in Kaohsiung. But it's a working class city. It reminds me of Chicago, and to be from there, it's just hard to turn you into a crazy lefty if you're from a very American, very average, small city. So they've really had struggles trying to get at him, and that's why he's doing as well in the polls as he is.
Yeah. All right, then really like to see if the debate is generating any data about now. Maybe by the time we wrap this up, we will get some polls from a U.S. news media who is benefiting more from the debate. Now we have one more question from Emily Sidefar from my class, and she asked, are there a lot of undecided voters, or have most people made up their minds? Okay, good question. Yeah.
Yeah, this is another one that I do know the answer to. The number of remaining undecided voters is very small. In 2016, there were a fair number, and a lot of them were Republicans who didn't like Trump, but had a hard time voting for Clinton, and so they waited down to the last minute. And then when the FBI under Comey said, well, we're investigating Clinton for national security breaches, that moved a lot of those people to vote for Trump with some reluctance. And there were undecided voters there that they could appeal to. The FBI was also investigating Trump for dealing with the Russians in an illegal kind of way, but they didn't bother to mention that. So the effect was that the last-minute undecideds broke toward Trump. This year, there just aren't any last-minute undecideds. They're running at about 5%. People have seen Trump for 4 years now. They know where they stand. They either like him or they don't. And there just aren't very many left. The ones that are left are disproportionately people who don't follow politics very closely. And so there are a lot of things they don't know. And both parties are trying to fill in information so that they'll swing their way. But the undecideds are really quite a small number this time. And that's part of why people think the polls are okay, that there there is no big group of undecideds to jump one way or the other at the last minute. They just aren't there. So if all of that proves to be right, then Biden's lead in the polls will stand up. And if it's not right, then the race may tighten at the last minute if those handful of undecided voters all go one way. That would make it closer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I have a science student, and Mona is Tamjam, and she asked a question that I think you may want to answer to. She asked, what is your personal idea on Maverick modeler, our friend Helmut Norpold? Does he reject that? And what do you think about Norpold's prediction? 91%, I think he's projecting 91% Donald Trump will prevail.
I know Professor Norpold a little bit, but not very well personally. He is a colorful person with an idea, some ideas of his own. If he proves to be correct, it will be a great victory for him because nobody else sees it that way right now. But if I had to bet $1,000, I would not bet on Donald Trump being reelected. Let's just leave it that way. And that's what almost everybody thinks, including the Trump campaign. That's why they were so anxious to debate tonight. They thought they made a mistake not debating last time. If you're behind, you want to debate as much as possible. So, he's hoping I haven't been watching, obviously. I've been doing this, but they were trying very hard to find something that would upset people about Biden, and we'll see whether they manage to do that or not.
Okay, yeah. One more question from another student, Emily, also saying, Emily here, what are the best polls to look at by your suggestion? There are so many different polls that it becomes overwhelming now. I think,
yes.
This is a question you can answer to.
Yes, that's a very good question. One website I will direct you to help with that is 538.com. 538 being the number of electoral college votes, so it's named for that. It's 538 written out, not the numbers 538, but 538 written out in English. And
literal, yeah.
They list all the polls going back months and starting with the most recent ones. And one very helpful thing that they supply along with the poll that they're reporting is a rating of how reliable that pollster has been in the past. And so they give grades like American college grades, A, B, C. C is bad. And that helps you sort out. So there are pollsters who are, have a so-called house effect. That is to say, they tend to be wrong toward one of the parties in the same direction every time. And if they are, then they get graded down by 538. And if they're more careful and more accurate, then they do better. So you might guess, for example, that the polls that Fox News does would be biased toward the Republicans. Fox News is a Republican TV channel in this country, if you've ever seen American television. But actually, that's not true. Fox does very careful polling and, as scientific as anybody, whereas other people who appear to be independent are actually kind of slanted. So they will tell you that. 538 will tell you that. And that helps evaluate the polls. So If you've got 3 reputable polls that say that Biden is up by 3 in a state and 1 that says that he's up by 10 or 12, that's less reputable, you know that you should be listening to the to the ones that have him by 3 and not to the others.
All right, I will pass to Peter's side again. And do you have more questions from the students or from any faculty members?
Just one last question is about, could you go, Dr. Achen, could you go back really quick to your suggestion on what Taiwan researchers could do by using the CMD? Because you see in United States, in Taiwan, there are different situations of local situations. So just go back really quick to that suggestion. Maybe we can just follow this line of research.
Yes. Again, I'm sorry that we're not in Taiwan tonight, not just because I know I would be getting a great dinner later, but because, I could really sit down with experts there and talk through what we could do. What you can't do right now in Taiwan is exactly the procedure that Jeremy Darrington and I used, because you don't have 2 rounds of the voter files. You just have 1, and so that will block doing, as I said earlier, that'll block doing the exact thing that we did. But if there may be other things that can be done there. One thing you have is tremendously good, very reliable election return data and census data from very small geographic units, the Li, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Carl mentioned earlier the possibility of doing ecological inference. That's a political sciencey word for just analyzing the aggregate data with various techniques. And I actually, Jeremy and I actually started out thinking that's what we were going to do with these data, and that it would be a very quick paper, few weeks, and we'd have it. Ecological inference was just disastrously bad on these data. And even the best techniques, I'm not talking about ecological regression or King's technique that doesn't work very well. Talking about other things, and they just all failed. So we would want to look at Taiwan, I think, and see whether that's the case there. If it's not, then it might be possible in Taiwan to do things more just as well as I and Jeremy have done, and do them more simply because you've got this wonderful aggregate data. But I don't know. We would just have to sit down and spend a day just going through the data and seeing what's there, and then go out to dinner and discuss it.
So the magic is really the dinner.
That's it.
Okay. I think before we forget, really like to ask if we can get your paper and your presentation. Maybe we can put it on a GitHub for students to download, and also the video will be uploaded, available on our website. We're still working on the technology, but we'll get this updated soon. And I think, well, great. We have so many questions, but they are also well entertained, well answered, well addressed, and it's amazing. And yeah, how many questions you have answered now so far? Peter, do you have any follow-up or any last-minute questions? And
I think that will be all for now.
Okay, great, and that's wonderful. I think we are at good timing also, and so we missed the third debate. I think we will let you go back to your debate watching party maybe tomorrow. I don't know whether you want to do it the rest of the evening. This is a little bit late here on your side, and at 11 p.m. already. All right. I think I want to cannot say thank you enough, and thank you again, Chris, and for giving us a wonderful night of question and answers. Also, your presentation. I think it's really interesting topic with really good methods. And okay, I think without further questions, I think we will just wrap up, conclude, and thank you very much and for attending our data analytics colloquium. Please don't forget we will have another talk and by a great Professor Larry Patel. Larry will give us another presentation, and specifically he will talk about the political impact of economic changes. So he will use extensive amount of data and then illustrate the point of the economic impact, economic impact on elections. So please do not miss this great speech by Professor Larry Patel of Vanderbilt University. So we will have more great speeches lined up, and after Larry, there will be Michael Lewis back and Colin Lewis back, and he will talk about the forecast technology, and also he will do some post-election analysis for us, provided that there will be a result, and hopefully that will be something he can talk about too. All right, and thank you very much. Thank you, Chris and Peter. Do you have any concluding remark?
Yeah, I would just want to add that a little promotion of next week's speaker, Larry Bartels. And I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you again to Dr. Achen, your wonderful presentation. And look forward to, next having dinner in Kaohsiung, Taipei, Taichung, somewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter and Carl, and thanks to all of you in the audience for your attention and for that very nice set of challenging questions. For the students in particular, if there are things I can do for you, it's easy to find me on email. It's just achen@princeton.edu. And please do reach out if there are things I can do for you.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Definitely something to do with the dinner first. We'll do the magic. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Go back to the debates now. Huh? Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, good. Great. Wonderful. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.